So I've got here, I'm going to do a presentation on what I call a COVID retrospective, looking back. You know, we've been doing this for 4 years now, dealing with the COVID pandemic, and we need to know more about this. So the question is, why am I doing a talk on this? What does that have to do with apologetics? Well, I'm a scientist, and I tackled the whole creation versus evolution topic because I see creation as science that matches the Bible, and I see evolution as not good science. It is not support for how we got here. The second crucial issue that is out in the culture there is global warming. And again, I've studied that. I've spoken on that many times, and I see that also as bad policy based on bad science. And so there's a bunch of talks I have. All of the talks I do are on my website. You can see my website there, heinzlycklama.com, and just poke around about. You can see the messages. All my messages each year are on a separate web page, and the ones that I'm doing this year you can see on messages-2024, and the ones over the past 15 years or so, they're all on my website. I've spoken overseas a lot on these topics. In fact, this morning I was doing an apologetics class, a class that I've given at many Bible schools overseas, and there's a group in Cameroon, which is a missionary. There's a missionary from there that we support. So they've asked me to do an apologetics course. So I'm doing the course that I have. It's on my website as well, and I'm doing it in Cameroon to about 25 different people, but via Zoom. Zoom is a great tool that we can use to reach more people, and they are recorded so that people can look at them later on again. So what I see in COVID is a very confusing scene out there. You know, and particularly what's controversial is the treatment of COVID. Should we have early treatment? Should we use vaccines? What about these therapeutics like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine? You know, what about them? It's very confusing. You know, what the mainstream media is telling us, what some doctors are telling us, and what the government is telling us. So I take the Bible seriously, and I use Acts 17:11, be a good Berean. If you're told something, check it out. You know, whatever I tell you tonight, check it out. And I like 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Test all things. So I just don't take it on just because somebody said it. You know, I'm a scientist, and I need to ask questions and make sure it's really true. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's see. This should move along here. Okay. All right, well, the first slide, I just have, I'm not going to read all the words in there, but I just want to point out, I'm going to talk about 10 different topics, and I'm going to step through them one at a time. You know, introduction, the vaccines, are they safe and effective, and what are some of the methods of measuring the effectiveness of the vaccines tell us? The VAERS database, I'll talk about that. I'll talk about what's it doing with pregnancies, miscarriages. What about all these sudden adult deaths that we're seeing? What's causing that? There's a data analyst who I really appreciate. He's done an analysis of excess deaths that we see. We see more deaths per week than we have been before COVID. Why is that? Look at the economic impacts, concerns about the vaccines, early treatment with therapeutics, and then draw some conclusions. So here, the first one here. Okay, I think that's stepping through. Yeah. So the origin of the coronavirus, I'm not going to talk about. You know, because it's. I think I've concluded pretty well where it came from and how, but that's not a topic we're going to discuss today. But just a little bit of history. You know, going back to December 2019. First cases here in the U.S., lockdown in March 2020 for, quote, 2 weeks. Well, would you believe 2 years? 2 weeks, they said. So then Dr. Zelenko who is a doctor in northern part of New York State. He started using hydroxychloroquine to save lives, and that became very controversial. He was saving lives, I can tell you that. And then the start of the vaccine project, Warp Speed. Cases and deaths keep on climbing worldwide. And December, Pfizer vaccine came out with an EUA approved vaccine. And then January 20, the new administration takes charge and King Fauci is in charge. VSafe and VAERS are the two methods of collecting data about the effectiveness of the vaccines. And then there's a bunch of boosters that came out, but the main one that I want to mention is the one that came out in September 2023. PCR test. How do we know we had COVID? Well, you took a PCR test. How effective is that? What does the inventor of that say? Dr. Mullis. He says, anyone can test positive for practically anything with a PCR test. If you run it long enough with PCR, you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. It doesn't tell you that you're sick. So take it for what it's worth. It could be, you could test positive 1 minute, you could test negative the other minute. It's not very accurate. Second thing that's controversial is the mask. You know, we're told to wear a mask, that'll protect you from the virus. Well, now the CDC even admits that the smoke particles, you know, if you use a cloth mask, it won't even stop the smoke particles, which are about 10 microns in size. Well, the virus is 0.1 micron, factor of 100 smaller yet. So if you put on a mask, you think it's stopping those viruses, it's not. In fact, the bad thing about that is you're breathing in your old air, not very healthy. So clearly we have shown that that doesn't work. And here's a test of that, mask usage versus positive test. Here's the yellow dotted line you see on top there. I'm showing it on my screen here, but unfortunately not there, but you can see the dotted line across the top there. That's the percentage of people who are wearing masks, up to about 80%. It started down in April 20, maybe 5–10%. Well, so as the number of people wearing masks increases and levels off, has nothing to do with the number of cases at all. So again, it's showing that it's not effective. Here's another thing we need to be aware of. Some people think, well, the vaccine is going to stop, it's going to cure you of COVID. But the problem is, COVID does not affect little kids. You know, if kids get COVID, anybody healthy, in fact, up to 50 years old, if they're healthy and no other comorbidities, you don't really need to take the vaccine, it turns out. Because look at here, age 0 to 4, you get 99.997% survival. They're not going to die from getting COVID. And so the elderly people, of course, are down to 96, 91, 94% will make it, but there's a significant number could be seriously affected. The other thing to point out is that the COVID is very different from the significant other pandemic 100 years ago. You know, back in 1918. In that case, the dark blue lines here show that the kids under age 4, for example, are very affected. In this case, it's dangerous for them. Whereas the people in the middle here, 30 to 40, some of them will lose their lives, but not as many. So it's a very different kind of threat than that pandemic was. A few facts about the vaccine. The efficacy rate, they said, was 85%. But what they didn't tell you is that it reduces its efficacy over time by about 5% per week. So it doesn't last very long, and that's why you have to take these boosters, which is very unusual for vaccines. The other thing that we're told is that, well, it does minimize, in some cases, the symptoms of COVID, but it does not stop reinfection. If you have taken a vaccine, it doesn't guarantee you're not going to get infected again. And it doesn't stop transmission of COVID. And what people don't, they said, well, the major vaccine products are based on the mRNA platform. But what they don't tell you is that M is not the real M, it's a synthetic M. So it's modified, it's human designed, it's not the real mRNA. And so that poses some problems too. It has not been safety tested on animals or even on humans. Clinical trials are incomplete. Very significant number of deaths and injuries, as you'll see. The vaccine manufacturers, of course, are not liable for any death or injury. It turns out infection with COVID does give you natural immunity, and you're probably better immune than if you take any of those vaccines. So, and we now know that effective and safe therapeutics are available and they do work. During the clinical trial, the CDC identified, or the FDA identified these symptoms, bad adverse effects of taking the vaccine. And well, I won't read them all here, but myocarditis, the second from the bottom on the left column, is a significant one. Most of your organs, if they're damaged, they can heal themselves over time. The heart is damaged, you cannot, and that's why you see a lot of impact of that. So before the vaccines were approved, they knew about these adverse effects that could happen. So it was all done in a hurry. So we had some lockdowns. And these lockdowns were very tragic, unfortunately. Turns out, first of all, that the PCR testing gave you 90% false positives. And vaccine and mask mandates came to be. Schools were closed here in the U.S. Small businesses were closed. Big government, big pharma, big medical, big box stores, big media, they did great, okay? But they also censored information, so we weren't told all the information we should have. And the economic results were disastrous. Many small businesses went bankrupt because they thought that the viruses went into the small business, but they didn't go into Walmart. So the small businesses were closed and they lost out. Much money was printed to no avail. Figure out $4 trillion was transferred from the middle class to the elite. The big boys. Very unfortunate. Now, most of these medical and international organizations you will know about, so I'm not going to read them all. But of course, the FDA and CDC here in the U.S. are very involved. NIH and NIAID, that's Fauci's organization, and a few others, which I won't read. And by the way, like I said, all of these slides will be uploaded to my website. So if you want to get the details here and the definitions, you can download them in a day or so. I've given this talk here in different audiences and with different information about 6 to 7 times now. And I've got more slides here than I can cover in 2 hours, so I have to cut out some. But I want you to have the information, so it's on the slides. So my analysis is based very strongly on medical scientists who I respect. And these are the 12 names that I depended on. Some of them you may have heard of. Even the former VP of Pfizer, Dr. Michael Yeadon, speaks against these vaccines. Let's see, Dr. Geert Vandenbusch, a virologist from Belgium, speaks against it. All of these speak very strongly against the use of these mRNA vaccines, and they explain why. And the other set of people that I listen to is experienced practicing doctors, people who are curing disease, their clients from this disease. Dr. Zelenko was the first one that hit the news. There was another French doctor also who did the same thing as Dr. Zelenko did. They all cured many people with COVID in the early days. Dr. Peter McCullough is a very well-published U.S. Cardiologist. He, in fact, is the most published cardiologist in the whole world. He's got hundreds of papers to his name. But he early on decided that this vaccine has not been tested enough. I'm not going to take it. And so he stepped back and he analyzed it. He read a lot of literature, and he speaks very strongly that these mRNA vaccines should be withdrawn. So I won't go through all the names. You can go through them. I'll mention some of them as we go through. But these are the 24 people that I relied on for my analysis. And the other two, since I am a computer scientist, I respect these people. Steve Kirsch, he got degrees in computer science. He's a high-tech entrepreneur, very successful one, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And so when he actually took the vaccine, and then after a month or so, he saw people having negative effects. So he decided to study it. And so he founded a early treatment fund. He founded the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, and he is very effective in analyzing data. So then the other one is Edward Dowd. He was an investor with BlackRock on the Wall Street, very, very effective. He is a very good data analyst. So he, again, he's an independent kind of a soul. He was living in Hawaii, and for the 2020, he didn't see any of his friends die or be affected by COVID. But 2021, he saw people starting to be injured and affected, and some even dying from the vaccines. So he studied that, and he wrote that book. It's called Case Unknown. And he talks about the epidemic of sudden deaths in 2021-22. So let's look at COVID vaccines. Are they safe and effective? And how do we analyze the effects of those vaccines? Well, there's two. VAERS database has been used since 1990. So for the last 35 years, it's been in use. That's what's used to check out all vaccines, including COVID. And then VSafe is a new system which runs on a smartphone, and some people took the smartphone app and used that. If they had an ill effect from taking a vaccine, they could report it on their smartphone. So those are the two main methods. If we look at what happened to the Department of Defense, we'll look at that and other concerns that medical doctors had. Here's one example looking before and after the introduction of the COVID vaccine in 2021. If you look at the first column on the left, reports of death from 1990 when the VAERS system started to 2020, there were 4,900 deaths recorded over those 30 years. That means about 163 deaths per year. With COVID, used just for 21, 22, 2 years, 15,000 something deaths, almost 8,000 deaths per year. So a huge factor, 48 times as many deaths from COVID as from any of the other vaccines. The same with hospitalizations and permanent disability and life-threatening effects, more than 20 times greater than with the other ones. And then here's another one that Senator Ron Johnson has used sometimes in hearings in the Senate. And he compares a drug adverse event comparison between ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and we'll take COVID vaccines. These are all used to treat COVID. So adverse effects with ivermectin, 4,297, with hydroxychloroquine, 29,000, and down here at the bottom in the red, over the time that the vaccines were used, 1.6 million adverse effects, as opposed to 29,000. So that's for ivermectin, it's 16 deaths per year, and for hydroxychloroquine, 69. But for COVID vaccines, it's almost 12,000 per year. So a very significant difference. Okay, I'll skip that one. This one here, same kind of thing. There are certain conditions like myocarditis. And the numbers on the right here say how much worse is it than all previous vaccines. And you're going to see numbers like in the 300s there. I'm not going to read them all. You can go down that list if you're interested. but in all cases, the COVID vaccine results of the adverse effect is significantly more. So now I want to talk about the V-Safe program a bit. This is it runs on your cell phone, and you're asked to answer these queries on there and check for symptoms. That's sort of the introduction one. Here are the symptoms that it asks for. First of all, did you feel any pain because of taking the vaccine? Was there redness there? And was there swelling or itching or none? Okay, so answer one of those 5. And then these symptoms, did you have any one of those? Chills, headaches, joint pains, vomiting, nausea, abdominal pain, etc. So you answer that. And then further, these are not provided, but these are sort of conditions that are measured by the VAERS system, and you can note them on the V-phone system, the V-Safe system, but it's not as easy to do. So then, what is the health impact? Well, after you got the shot, were you still able to work? Are you unable to work, unable to do any normal activities? Did you have to get care from a doctor or other healthcare professional? And did you have to go to the hospital? Do you have to go to the emergency room? So all that data is gathered. And so for the 10 million, you'll see in the top right, 10,108,273, that's the number of people that use this V-Safe phone application. So you'll see of those, you'll see in the top left, the bar there, the yellow, orange, and red. That is 3.3 million of the people, the 10 million, had to report some ill effect from the use of the vaccine. That's a huge number. But moreover, of those, of the 10 million, the number up here in the top right, 750,000 something reported something that they had to get some help with. So 7% of those 10 million had to get help with the condition they suffered after taking that vaccine. Here's another chart which shows you the effect on the Defense Department. As you know, many people in the Defense Department, they were mandated to take the vaccine, and some chose not to and left the services. But before, up to 2019, those first 4 yellow ones, it was pretty standard at less than 50,000 reportable events. But then come 2020, and especially 2021, the vaccine started 2021, you'll see that the number of adverse effects is almost 4 times as much as before the vaccine. So many were impacted. To summarize this part here, there were COVID vaccines concerns early on. Denmark, for example, they stopped using the vaccine for anybody younger than 50 years because most of them were healthy, they didn't need it. And then in the UK, they stopped anybody under 12 from using it and had other limitations. The spike protein, when you put the shot in your arm, the spike protein that is produced there, it's supposed to stay in the arm. Well, it doesn't. We now know it goes through all of your organs throughout the body. And I'll cover that in a bit more here. Toxicology, I mean, the vaccine is actually toxic, according to this doctor, this virologist, Dr. Cole. And he has done a number of autopsies clearly showing the effect of taking the shot. For those that died from it, they did, some of them did autopsy, but not enough. But he did a lot of them. And we'll talk more about what he found. Mortality rate with age, Dr. Risch, he studied that, and he says that anybody, really anybody in their teens and younger doesn't need to take this vaccine. Doesn't help. Early treatment with therapeutics. The government did not allow you to use ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, but there are ways to get it. And here's 2 doctors who led that effort, Dr. Corey and Dr. Mark. And they started the Frontline Doctors Organization to provide help for people that are suffering from COVID vaccines. So Dr. Peter McCullough, he says these vaccines are unsafe and ineffective. That's his opinion. There was no independent monitoring in the clinical trials. They were done in such a rush that it really wasn't very helpful. There are no clinical trials done on pregnant women. They skipped human testing, a lot of human testing. And another thing that was concerning is the consistency of the vaccine batches. In the VAERS report, when somebody reports an adverse event in VAERS, they also give the, what batch number was it and from which manufacturers. So we see there that there are some very bad batches in there. And we also now see that the more doses you take, there are more deaths. And we'll see that in the curves that come up here. So now for some recent VAERS data. I'm going to go show you some data that are on the VAERS website. Talk about the number of deaths per year, talk about when they occur, see some things of risk, and impact on major organs. There's impact on all major organs. The more doses you take, the higher risk of hospitalization, ICU, or death. The vaccine safety signals were largely ignored by the CDC. Funeral directors were seeing excess death of young, which is very concerning. I know a few funeral directors personally, and they confirm that. They're very surprised by this. So here's what you'll see on the VAERS COVID vaccine adverse events reports. And these 6 big ones are, the 34,000 deaths, the 194,000 hospitalizations, urgent care, 147,000, and so on. And so that's how it appears on that page. But for further details, I've laid them out here. So this is as of August the 18th, 2023. And you'll see 35,000 deaths so far from all the COVID vaccines, from 2021 all the way through 2023. Number of hospitalizations, urgent care, doctor's visit, Bell's palsy is a biggie, miscarriages for the ladies that are pregnant, heart attacks, myocarditis, permanently disabled in some cases, etc. If you, I've left the URL if you want to look at the data there. Just get there, grab that, and link it. Now let's look at the number of deaths reported to VAERS by year, all the way from 1990 before COVID, and COVID started in 2021. So here, all the way to 1990, there are less than 50, 100, maybe even 200 in some cases. Then all of a sudden, 2021 spikes up, huge spike. That, to me, is a safety signal. Something needs to be done, but that was ignored. Some people would say, well, the CDC didn't verify that he died from the vaccine. It could have been some other cause too, But it's frightening, and that's what we're seeing. That number in itself should stop these vaccines. And then this one here is more telling. These are the number of days after you got the vaccine. The first day is day 0, and the second day is day 1, and all the way out to 27, and of course further out, not as many deaths. But what this shows you, if this is going to impact you badly, it's probably going to happen in the first few days. And that's very, very frightening. And that's, again, that should be enough to stop it, but it hasn't. Okay, even Europe has its own VAERS system. They have, we have 35,000 here. They got 50,000 dead over all the countries in Europe. That's huge. And then here's another slide which is very telling. This is the reported deaths by vaccine type from 1990 to the present. So I know you can't read all the fine print there, but It starts with the Ebola and polio even, and you'll see in the top left, those numbers are very small, all the way from 1 to 60. And so, and then you get to these other ones down here, and you get, influenza, which is a little larger, but then here's the one that stands out, COVID, 37,100 deaths, and the vaccine is still being used. These here, the ones that got higher, they stopped. Most vaccines during the trial, if they got more than 50 deaths, they would stop. Okay, this one is just a huge outlier. And here's another way to show it. It shows the number of deaths per million. So that's a million doses that were given. How many deaths per million? And most of these numbers are pretty small, around 1, 1.5, 2. But here's the influenza, the flu, the big blue one. Well, that is the number of doses, and that is almost 1.9 billion doses of the flu vaccine. But there are only from that, there are 0.25 deaths per million doses. So a pretty small ratio. So it'd have to be billions for for people to have deaths from that. But then you'll compare that with COVID, and COVID at this point only had 700 million doses given, and this is in the US, 700 million, because some people took more than 1 or 2. But for them, the number of deaths per million is 25 per million. So that means this is about 70 times worse than the vaccine for the flu. The other thing that we note is for myocarditis, where the heart is damaged, that happens much more frequently actually in the young. This is the age from 0 to 100. So most of the ones with serious damage of the heart, the myocarditis, are the young ones. And you'll see that in the athletes. I mean, athletes are very active, and if they stress themselves too much, they're the ones that are going to suffer from that. In most of the cases, we won't look at all these curves, but in the case of Israel, for example, when it launched its dose 3 on July 70, the number of deaths increased. I mean, the number is just the number per million. It's still not that high. It's like around 3, but it went from around 0.5 to 3, so quite a steep. And the other thing that I showed you, that most of the people that do die from the vaccine die within the first 4 or 5 days. But the CDC, in their wisdom, said anybody who has taken the vaccine is not totally vaccinated until 2 weeks, which means anybody that died within the first 2 weeks is not counted among the vaccinated. So the numbers are all skewed. That's not true in other countries, but in the US, unfortunately, that's the way it's done. And here's another study that was done by the Cleveland Clinic, a well-recognized medical clinic in the US. I think they had 50,000 employees or so, and they measured their response to the doses that they took. So everybody who had a dose, they have the cumulative incidence of COVID problems there. And so very, very low in the first, and this is the number of days along the, all the way up to 200 days. So, and the bottom line is, unvaccinated. Second line is 1 dose, 2 dose, 3 dose, and more than 3 doses. So the point is, the more doses you take, the more likely you are to get COVID again, which is very surprising. And then here's another curve which shows the impact of the number of injections, shots done per week in these different countries. And let me pick this, Germany, the second one in Germany. You'll see on the blue, it's the number of shots that were given per week. And over time, month by month, the more you gave, the more shots they gave, the curve's going up, the blue curve. Then the orange curve which is the number of deaths per week that occurred. That's the scale on the right, which is smaller, of course. But that is follows it by about 2 months. So, and in all these countries here that I showed, Canada, UK, US, a number of different curves, they all show that. And another one here, this is from New Zealand. We have a lot of good data from New Zealand. There was these bars are different dates. And the fourth one here, the darker blue one, is in 2021 when the vaccine is in use. But there was an 80% increase in hospitalizations for heart attacks from the 2018 up to 2021 when the vaccines were started. Very significant. Okay, so now I'm going to go into a different topic for pregnancies, miscarriages, stillbirths. We're going to look at the impact of the vaccines on them in these ways, and we'll look at the VAERS report. In terms of miscarriage and stillbirth, for example, the VAERS reports show a 4,000% increase in miscarriages and birth rates from previous years. Huge difference. Menstrual cycles, hemorrhages increased. There was a drop in live births, and the percentage of pregnant women vaccinated and maternal mortality rate. So I'm going to explain these 4 graphs. I know you can't read them from there, but the first one here, miscarriages, stillbirths. The top one here, at the beginning of 2021, down to 0. The number of miscarriages now, up to a few hundred per week here. And then when they occur, they occur very quickly. You'll see in the second chart there to the right that again, within the first day is when most of these miscarriages happen. Okay, so here's a bigger chart, reports of miscarriages, stillbirth by year. And you'll see, again, all the way back to 1990, and then we see 2021, a huge increase in miscarriages and stillbirths. Okay, and then reports of menstrual hemorrhages, monthly live births have decreased over the years. And then also the birth rate, if you look at Australia, for example, all these years from 2012 to 2021, represented by one of these lines here, you'll see for 2021, the birth rate has dropped significantly. And we don't have all the numbers for every country, of course, but that's also a very significant occurrence. Okay, number 5, sudden adult death syndrome. What do we mean by that? Thousands are dying and unexpectedly, and short form SADS, occurring more frequently in working age groups. More children dying suddenly, unexpectedly, and according to Dr. Peter McCullough, what we're seeing is through the roof. You can't understand it. Athletes are collapsing, and some of them are dying. Here's one count in 2022, 769 athletes collapsed. Athlete deaths are higher than expected by 17 times, 1,700%. Young practicing doctors, and this is somebody in Canada studied practicing doctors who are in the age normally between 25 and 60 or so. They're practicing doctors. They're as healthy as can be. But unfortunately, they are required to take the vaccine, all of them. There's no exceptions to that. And so we see a lot more young doctors who are dying in their practice, and that just shouldn't be happening. Airline pilots, we are starting to see some problems there. And all airline pilots have to get an EKG test every 6 months to make sure their heart is well, and make sure their reactions are fast enough to handle emergencies. So what they have found that with the vaccines, because all of them had to take the vaccine as well, the more they took, the harder it got to passing that stringent test. So they made it less stringent, so more pilots could pass it. And we are seeing some cases of, disabilities among the pilots. And even Southwest, pilot death rate was 6 times normal during a certain period of time. Okay, so now some of these numbers again, thousands of, in this case, 1,000 athletes collapsing. These have been recorded, up to June 2022. And during that period also we can see the blue numbers here. These are the ones that, the case where athletes collapse. And so the blue line is higher. This starts from, the beginning of 2021 as the vaccines started to come in more heavy use through to 2022. So the blue is the number that died, that were collapsed, and the red is the ones of those that actually died because of that. So again, a very stringent concern. This one here, this talks about alerts among pilots again. Alerts received on a monthly basis, the frequency of the alerts. If you look back to 2018 toward the far left and to the middle of the chart, you'll see it going up and down the green up to the beginning of the end of 2021. You'll see the average of that 2018 to 19 was an average of 29 reports per month reports of emergency. As soon as the vaccine started, the mandates that came in place November of that year, the yellow line you'll see increased. And so that in 2022, that number was 272% increase from the flat before. And in 2023, 386% increase, in emergency reports. I talked about the dead doctors reported. Somebody follows those. I think the number is actually over 130 now, up to this time. But again, these are young doctors who just should not be dying at this age. And then another person from Massachusetts did a study. He looked at obituaries. The obituaries are available online, and he searched for the word suddenly or unexpectedly in the obituary, because in some cases, people don't know why he died. He was too young to die, and so they would say, well, unexpectedly or suddenly. So he did a search from 2015 to 2023, and so up to 2020, you'll see that there's between 40,000 and 50,000, but then all of a sudden in 2021 it's up to almost 80,000 reports of sudden deaths, which were unexpected, and so on. And so he also he went and got the data from many of the states, and you'll see all the ones he's reported on here see the same effect. 2021, a spike up suddenly. And here, in the case of excess death among children, young adults from 0 to 44, you'll see the green line here is the number of deaths by children. And then here, all of a sudden, in in the fall of 2021, we see that red spike there. So that number is a huge spike above that green line there. So again, we're seeing excess deaths among the children. So then let's look at the excess death phenomenon a little bit more. Edward Dowd is the one I referred to before. He's a data analyst. He wrote that book, Cause Unknown. And so he looked at all the data and said, something's going on here, and I'm going to study it and find out. And so he looked at the age group from 25 to 44. I mean, these are all young people. They should not be experiencing problems, but they experienced an 84% increase in excess mortality, in that age group. So And excess deaths, of course, are from all causes, okay? You can't hide them. I mean, the number of deaths that occur is what it is. And so excess death rates in 2022 in these other countries, we'll look at that. Excess mortality, age group comparison. Mortality increased with high vaccination rates. Insurance claims impact. U.S. life insurance company, there's one that was reported in 2022 that experienced 40% more deaths in the working people, young working people. They have life insurance, you know. Us oldies, we don't need life insurance, but the young people, they have life insurance and they're working. And so they took it out. So if there's a 40% increase in the number of deaths in that rate, those companies are going to go bankrupt because they don't count on that. They're actuaries. They know how many to expect to die each year. So it has an impact on life insurance. And here's that number here. From 2021, it had already gone up some because of the stress of COVID. But here we have that spike to 84% above normal, above zero here, above normal. So a huge increase, and that's when the mandates were required and more people were getting vaccinated. And this just shows that another way, from the age group from 25 to 44. And I've got a bunch of them that show from Australia, for example, for different age group. The first one on the left is from age 0 to 44. Next one is 45 to 64, 65 to 74, 75 to 84, and above 85. And you'll see in all cases, the blue is in 2020, the black is in 2021, and the green is in 2022. So the number of excess deaths increased in that country quite significantly. And let's see. This is one assurance analyst. So a high vax rate results in high mortality. In other words, the more doses you take, the higher the mortality rate. And what it means is it shortens people's lifetime. Okay, and that shows in here. One analyst said it decreases your lifetime by 7% for each extra dose. Now, I'm not sure it's that much, but anyway, that's one analyst number. Here's another one from the UK. And so they, from zero, excess death, they have certain events that occurred, but the big jump was this last stretch from 2021 all the way up to 2023, okay, and it was still increasing quite significantly. These are excess deaths. That mean that the line should be at the bottom. It shouldn't be growing like that. Here's another example from Germany. Germany, this from the date of 2016 all the way to 2022, and it shows the number of fatalities per quarter. I mean, these are people dying from all causes, causes not stated. But it's these 4 quarters, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, all in red. And then you get to 2021, the very first quarter here, we have a significant jump in the number of fatalities, more than double what it was in previous quarters. And so that is a very significant finding. This is another way to look at it. These, on the far right, these yellow lines at the top, there's 4 parts, starting at the blue, which is sudden death. Sudden death is in the blue. Death occurring within less than 24 hours after onset in the orange, and then death without anybody present in the gray, and then other vague or unspecified causes of death in the yellow. So again, the important point, significant excess deaths. And these are just cardiovascular diseases. I won't go into the details here, but you can just see in the last 2 bars there are for 21, 22, and you can see they're much higher in all cases than for the previous years. Same thing with cancers, much, much higher in the last 2 years. And then this is sort of averaged out This is the excess death chart per country. And I've just got 4 Western countries here. Canada, the average is 20% excess deaths over what it was for the years before 2020. The US is at 12%, Australia 11%, and New Zealand is at 8%. And then here's the one from, let's see, yeah, from the UK here. And you'll see the mortality deviation trend from 2018 to 2020. The blue line is, wiggles and up and down within a certain range. Then all of a sudden, at the beginning of 2021, that line goes from, the dotted line goes up at a huge rate. And that is what we call a black flag event. I mean, that just shouldn't happen. There's something really bad happened. And here's another one for Japan. The years 2000 all the way up to 2021, and then all of a sudden look at the number of excess deaths. Huge. And in summary there, for the 20 most vaccinated, highly developed nations, 2020, the excess rate was 4.5%, 2021, 9.9%, and then 2022, 11.2%. So again, huge numbers of increases in excess deaths. Okay, now I want to look at the economic impact of all this. And this is put together by Ed Dowd, okay, the analyst from BlackRock. Just to explain that curve there for those that are not mathematicians, everything that the events that happen at random, they happen over a distribution like that. And most events happen within that distribution or within what we call 1 sigma of the center line. But if it falls way outside, it's called a black flag, and it's like 11 sigma away is way outside of the expectation. And so the number of absence, the number of working lost time is very, very high. Okay, so those 3 things, injuries that happen and people lose work time, they can't work all the time, or they're disabled, they can't work anymore at all, or death. And of course that is the worst possible. So I'm going to just run through a few of these. Just the increase in disabilities in civilian labor force. You can see from 2008 to about 2021, it was up and down squiggles. But then all of a sudden, 2021, up 200%. Very significant number of disabilities. But to summarize that, looking at the people that are in the workforce from 16 to 64, 2022, 148 million people. 81% of them had no ill effect from the vaccine. 18% had injuries, so they lost some work. And 0.93% had disabilities and they couldn't work anymore at all. And others, 0.05 to 0.1%, were, they died from that. And so the cost, Ed Dowd calculates, is 89 from injuries, a billion, 52 billion from disabilities, and 5.6 billion from deaths. And there's the summary. Okay, concerns. Okay, I'm going to talk about a few of these here. Some of them I'm just going to skip through because I'm running out of time. All these people, what did they tell you up front? Safe and effective. If you take it, you won't kill your grandmother, and so you better take it. And they stuck with that story, safe and effective. But the result was other than that. You'll see here, standardized mortality rate for 100,000 persons. And these are the number of mortal deaths per 100,000. You can see the red line is the one with the person that have taken 4 doses. So the more doses they took here in England, the worse it was for them. Another concern was contamination in the vaccines. And here's an example of, we got this data from New Zealand. Looking at these 3 batches, batches 1, 10, and 123, towards the bottom left, 711 people in that batch, 152 died. 21% mortality rate from that batch. Another one, batch, 4.5% mortality. Another one, 0.04% mortality. And so if you look at the top, these are the top 10 batches, the 10 worst batches in the 100 or so batches in New Zealand. You can say these are totally unacceptable. Switzerland, for example, the cancer treatment increased significantly starting in 2021. Heart damage, blood damage, spike protein. It's like I said, it doesn't stay in the arm. It does go to all of the major organs in your body. And these are the ones that are listed and the ones that are affected the most. I'm not going to go into the details. If you want the details, just download my slides. And here's a very significant autopsy finding in Germany. They took, 30 different people that died and suspected vaccine, and they looked at those. The ones in yellow, almost all of them are cardiac arrest, myocarditis or pericarditis. The second thing that was found recently is that embalmers, embalmers take, drain the blood out of the vein, and that's a pretty straightforward job. But in cases where the vaccine resulted in the death, they find these fibrous structures and huge clots in these veins. Some, 63 of these embalmers found none. 112 embalmers found 1 to 20% of their clients. And you can see in the middle here, most of them found some of these clots in the veins. Okay, here's another cardiologist. He's from the UK. His father died from the vaccine, and he left his position and now speaks out against the vaccines. Many doctors have come out and declared that we need to stop this vaccine totally. Even back before the vaccine came out in 2020, some doctors spoke out. Rome Declaration in September 2021. And then there's a whole bunch of other doctors over 2021 all the way to 2022 who spoke out against those vaccines. And here's the last one I captured just this month. 17,000 physicians and scientists call for the mRNA vaccines to be pulled off the market. That's February the 12th this month. Over 17,000 physicians and scientists have called for these modified mRNA shots to be pulled off. And now you'll see in the blue and the green, there are more and more politicians recognizing this is a bad thing for people. And they are starting to see the problem and starting to agree that it needs to be pulled. I was talking about the booster that came out in 2023. The time that they decided the booster was to address the XBB.1.5. That was the predominant variant at the time. By the time the booster came out, it was less than 0.1% of all the infections. So it was useless. No point taking it. There's some futuristic things that are happening next. A vaccine, maybe you can just inhale it as a powder. And here's your friend Bill Gates come out and say, well, we can have a wafer that we can just, take in your mouth and it'll feed you with a vaccine. Okay, early treatment, therapeutics. I'm not going to cover a lot of this, just to say if you want information, look at these 3 websites, C19hcq.org, C19IVM, that's ivermectin.org, and C19early. advocating early treatment. In the early days, we already knew that the countries that were using hydroxychloroquine had a very, very low death rate, and the ones that were not had a higher death rate. And ironically, in Africa, for example, the countries in blue are the ones that were using ivermectin, even before the vaccines came out. The death rate, the blue line here, very, very low. The ones that chose to wait for the vaccine, the yellow, their death rate, is much, much higher. In India, for example, there's one province, Uttar Pradesh, that is 240 million people. The government there chose to give everybody an ivermectin packet, and it cured almost, there's almost no COVID that occurred there. You're not going to hear that on the mainstream press, of course. So these are more things on the ivermectin. And then the CDC finally comes out and say at the end of this, August of 2023, after the death rate has, gone down significantly, okay, now you can use ivermectin. We agree you can use it. Well, it should have been used. What we know today, PCR tests don't work, cloth masks don't work. In fact, they result in pathogens collecting in your mouth area. Natural immunity is better than vaccination. No one under 30 should be vaccinated with these COVID vaccines. And we have to understand that the mRNA is synthetic. It's not real, it's synthetic. Okay, most of these things I think we've covered. Vaccine mandates, just not good. They break every rule, medical rule in the road. It violates medical freedom. The doctor swears by the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. Nuremberg Code said you must, if you are given a vaccine, experimental vaccine, you must be notified of the risks and benefits and be able to, you would have to consent to get it. And so on. We should let doctors do their job. So I'm just going to run through these quickly. Let's see. Pfizer is, of course, in it to make money. CDC is not being honest. They covered up much information that we should have known about. Okay, some good things are happening. Okay, well, so again, you can study these at your will, but so what should we as believers do about this? Well, to me, we should search for the truth. We should always go for truth. There's a book written by Dr. Jeff Myers, the president of Summit Ministries. I've read that book. It's exactly what we should be doing. And if we stuck to the truth, we wouldn't have all these troubles. And then, there are dozens of books written about COVID already, and I've just got 30 of them on here. And there's an outline of one of them, which is very good, this one here. So I encourage you to go and read some of them. But of course, just download my slides and you'll get that information. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. If there's time for questions, I'll be happy to take a few. Okay.
Do you have a few minutes? We could take a few questions. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, 2 questions. Do you agree that the VAERS data is at least 1% to 5% underreported? And do you believe that COVID was a bioweapon?
Unfortunately, given the origin of COVID, it came out of a Wuhan lab. We know it was funded by, the U.S., Fauci, and all that. So unfortunately, there are many biolabs around the world, and they're very dangerous. And whether it escaped accidentally or intentionally, to me, we shouldn't be doing experiments like that in the first place. What's the point of trying to find a bad virus, to create a bad virus and then build the vaccines to fight it? It makes no sense. So there is certainly a lot of question about it being a bioweapon. And there's many parties involved in that. Yeah.
And then the VAERS data being underreported.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The VAERS data being underreported. And then regarding the VAERS data being underreported by, let's say, 1 to 5%
Yes.
or more.
It is known to be underreported by as much as a factor of 40. Huge. So the numbers we're seeing here are small. But of course, the people that keep on saying it's safe and effective, they don't want to look at it. CDC has not examined all those reports, even that they have, to determine whether they are accurate. We are not being told everything that we should. Information is being kept from us, unfortunately. Yeah.
What about Paxlovid? Does that fit any one of the ones you mentioned, like ivermectin or something? Because when I had it, that's what they gave me, and in 5 days, nothing.
Sorry, say that again?
Paxlovid, that's the recommended nowadays. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, is there a solution for people that have been vaccinated already to treat them?
No, what is Paxlovid? You mentioned ivermectin and a couple of other hydro, whatever that big word is, and they gave me Paxlovid. What is that?
Well, ivermectin is a well-known drug, right, that has been around for 30, 40 years. And in fact, it's a miracle drug like penicillin.
My question is, what is Paxlovid? Do you know anything about it? What is it? They gave it to me, and okay, it was
yeah, I mean the Paxlovid.
Paxlovid.
Yeah, okay.
Is that part of one of those?
Yeah, it is one that is supposed to be able to treat COVID. Right. And, but it's made by Pfizer, right? And it's very expensive. Yeah.
Then it was free, but that's
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Why do you think they keep continuing to push this vaccine situation?
I'm sorry.
Why do you think they're continuing to push the vaccine?
Why they continue to push
Yes.
it? Yeah. Well, it's because of the control that the big pharma
Big
has.
money.
Because you'll notice, why was the vaccine approved in the first place? It's by a committee of 15 people appointed by the FDA, but who pays them, right? That's the problem. Follow the money.
Do you feel that it's on purpose that these people are being murdered? I mean,
Well,
let's get real.
yeah,
It is.
yeah. I mean, there's never been a vaccine like this. No.
I have a question about the COVID pill that they give if somebody doesn't want a vaccine. Now they have a pill they can give.
I think that's a
Is that what the Paxlovid is?
Yeah.
Okay. And I just have to feel with all this vaccine craziness that it must be a way for them to depopulate our world, you know?
Yeah. Well, there are people that think that.
Yeah, I absolutely refused
yeah.
it when it was coming out. I haven't
Yeah.
had a vaccine and I haven't had COVID.
Yeah.
And I thank God, and I used to work in a hospital. Funny thing is, I injured my knee a year before all this COVID junk came. And it just kind of like, I look at it, it spared me. I was able to retire a little bit early
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
be subjected to all that.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful.
Yeah.
Could you speak to what the spike protein is and what it does in our bodies? Spike protein?
Well, yeah, the spike protein is toxic. And, it was designed, they thought it was designed to, stay in your arm, in the muscle. But the problem is it gets into your bloodstream and goes through to all the organs. Now, not as, I don't think is as strong as it is here, but it does get in. And depending how weak or strong your immune system is, it could damage the organs.
What does it do in the body?
Pardon?
What is the function of the spike protein?
Well, it's supposed to produce it's supposed to go into your cell and produce, immunity in your cell. Yeah, I mean, it's designed to do that. Yeah.
Regarding, oh, it's so loud, masking. So at the beginning of COVID, I was listening to a gentleman named Stephen Petty. He was an industrial hygienist, and he was talking about the fact how ineffective masking is.
Yeah.
And so my sweet mom here, I take her to the doctor sometimes, and our clinics around Washington are still, even though there are no mandates requiring masking, which I usually refuse, but if these are medical clinics, shouldn't they know this?
Yeah, they should.
Why are they still pushing it?
Many doctors cannot afford to speak out because their livelihood depends on that. So you got to be very careful.
And even though the state and the medical laws aren't really pushing it, private clinics are still doing it though.
Yeah, like the Everett Clinic, for example.
Yes,
yeah.
that's what it was through the Everett Clinic. So
Yeah.
maybe we won't go there anymore. Yeah.
So with all the people that you listed that have come out against it, what do you think it's going to take for Congress, or what can we do? I mean, to get it.
Well, you can certainly speak out and to your congressperson and to your senator. Like Ron Johnson, the senator, he has spoken out against it, right? And he's had hearings, but not enough government people agree with him yet, right? That's the problem. As that one curve I showed you from this month, more and more Congress people and senators agree that it should be called off the market, but not enough yet,
Okay, Heinz, I'm just going to make a comment a minute about the masks. All the ones that have the masks in their offices, they get a kickback from the government to have the masks there, and this is why they push the masks.
Yeah.
And if you refuse, they won't make you take it, but they try really hard because they get a kickback.
I just wanted to ask if, actually this is a misnomer, they call it a vaccine. Is it a true vaccine?
I mean, it really is.
Because a vaccine is given to stop you from getting a
Right.
disease, correct?
Yeah.
So
Well-
is this a true vaccine? It was manufactured, it's synthetic. So
Yeah.
is it really a vaccine?
Well, they changed the definition of a vaccine.
Well, yeah,
right?
that's what we do all the time.
Yeah, to cover that. But it's really gene therapy, right? So it's not, it doesn't stop you from getting it again.
Doesn't actually attack your immunity system and make it worse?
Yeah, the curves I showed from the Cleveland Clinic, the more doses you take, the more likely you are to get COVID again. So because
It reduces your immunity.
It reduces your natural immunity. Yeah.
We maybe have time for one more question.
So on your slides, you were reporting per the data that 35,000 deaths basically have occurred, I think, in the U.S.
Actually, some foreign are also reported in that, but it's mostly U.S.
Okay, so, and we agree that the VAERS data is underreported by, you said, about 40?
Yeah.
So, and you're the more scientific person than I am, 35 times 40 is really closer to the number of deaths that have occurred in the U.S.,
Yeah.
which would be?
Well, if you multiply those two out, you're over 1 million.
Over 1 million?
Yeah.
In the U.S.?
Yeah. Now, there's no way we can verify that, but see, that's why the excess deaths, it should match that. The excess deaths, because if you can't explain those excess deaths, then, what else could it be? Because if you have, you got 1 million people dying per year well, in the U.S. is more like more than 3 million per year. And so then if you have 4 million dying in 1 year, then the excess, 1 million, is due to something else. Yeah.
Heinz, before we close down, you brought some books and some pamphlets back there. Did you want to mention those? And then I'll have you close us down in word of prayer.
Those books back there, we sell books at our meetings up in Arlington. But so we bought some books there from Bruce Malone. He's a creation scientist. He's written a bunch of daily devotional books which explain design. Our world, our animals are designed precisely to function for life. And so those books have things that we've given them to our grandchildren, for example. They're great devotionals for them to read. It's just 1 page per day. It's very easy. Yeah.
Anything else?
Sorry?
Anything else to comment on? And I know you had some brochures.
No, I've got some flyers on the back table there. You can pick up whatever you like.
All right.
Yeah.
Close us out in a word of prayer if you would.
Father, we come to you just to thank you for this time. We just discussed a very difficult topic, Lord, and yet we need to look for the truth. As you say in your word, we need to be respectful as well of the people that control this, but yet, Lord, we need to speak out too and speak the truth to them. And we just pray that you would give us the wisdom to discern what is right and what is not, and just help us to just get the word out, Lord. And we just thank you that, Lord, you created a perfect body for us, and we need to treat it with due respect. We need to treat it with things that will help. And we just pray that you would just help us be discerning, and we just pray that the word would get out, that people would learn the truth. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.